Okay, let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the 1867 edition of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. And it's my first time streaming. Hopefully it's all working. We'll sort it out later if it isn't. My father's family name being Pirrip, and my Christian name Philip, my infant tongue could make of both names nothing longer or more explicit than Pip. So I called myself Pip and came to be called Pip. That's it. That's the first step on a long journey for us. On the face of it, it just appears to be what name we'll call ourselves. But if you know anything about Great Expectations, parentage and fatherhood are very important. So now that we've taken this first step, let's take another. I gave Pirrip as my father's family name on the authority of his tombstone and my sister, Mrs. Joe Gargery. Gargery or Gargery, I don't know. It's one of those things when you read, in your head you make up one pronunciation and you say it for the rest of the book. But when you read aloud, you're not quite as sure. Who married the blacksmith. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs, my first fancies regarding what they were like were unreasonably derived from their tombstones. The shape of the letters on my father's gave me an odd idea that he was a square, stout, dark man with curly black hair. From the character and turn of the inscription, also Georgiana, italics, also Georgiana, wife of the above. I drew a childish conclusion that my mother was freckled and sickly. To 5, it's my apologies for the typos. You have to think that this is the first of, what is it going to be, 50, 60 sessions? So I'll get better. To 5 little stone lozenges, each about 1.5 feet long, which were arranged in a neat row beside their grave, and were sacred to the memory of 5 little brothers of mine. who gave up trying to get a living exceedingly early in that universal struggle. I am indebted for a belief I religiously entertained that they had all been born on their backs, with their hands in their trousers pockets, and had never taken them out in this state of existence. So it's a light-hearted passage about a very serious theme, basically death and the loss of Pip's entire family, with the exception of his sister. But his father's dead, his mother's dead, he's lost 5 brothers, and I think there's a lot to be learned from this, that, you know, how you tonally approach loss is very interesting. And I think, you know, great art always teaches us how to read it. And what is this teaching us? It's telling us, for the rest of this book, I may talk about heavy themes of loss, trauma, and, you know, other dark things. But as a narrator, I will always be light. I will always have a sense of humor, and I'm not self-pitying. You know, self-pitying is a quality that would be very difficult to read for the duration of the book, for 180,000 words. So I think it's very interesting that even though they set out their stall, it's going to be a dark book at times, we'll keep the tone light. So that's interesting. Ours was the marsh country down by the river. Within, as the river wound, 20 miles of the sea. So now we get some scene setting. My first, most vivid and broad impression of the identity of things, what a lovely expression, the identity of things, seems to have been gained on a memorable raw afternoon towards evening. At such a time, I found out for certain that this bleak place, overgrown with nettles, was the churchyard, and that Philip Pirrip, late of this parish, and also Georgiana, wife of the above, were dead and buried, and that Alexander, Bartholomew, Abraham, Tobias, and Roger, infant children of the aforesaid, were also dead and buried, and that the dark, flat wilderness beyond the churchyard, intersected with dikes and mounds and gates, with scattered cattle feeding on it, was the marshes, and that the low leaden line beyond was the river, and that the distant savage lair from which the wind was rushing was the sea, and that the small bundle of shivers, growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry, was Pip. So a lovely long sentence here, and at the end of the sentence you're like, where is he going with this sentence? And we get a lot of the list of names is sad. Each of those were his brothers, and we get the layout of the land and the marshes. But there's also, I think, critically, what is Pip's emotional state and the aloneness and the loneliness of being without a family. Hold your noise. Now that's an entrance. Hold your noise, cried a terrible voice, as a man started up from among the graves at the side of the church porch. Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat. Now that's an entrance, and those of us who know the book know that this is a very important entrance, and it's starting up from among the graves, like taking the already scared Pip in the churchyard and then putting this specter emerging from the graves. So a very dramatic opening, you know, it's not slow at all. And I'll cut your throat, jeez. A fearful man, all in coarse grey, with a great iron on his leg. A man with no hat, and with broken shoes, and with an old rag tied round his head. A man who had been soaked in water, and smothered in mud, and lamed by stones, and cut by flints, and stung by nettles, and torn by briars, who limped and shivered and glared and growled, and whose teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin. Wow, I mean, that is a killer paragraph of so many strong verbs. Soaked, smothered, lamed, cut, stung, torn, limped, shivered, glared, growled, chattered, seized. I mean, it paints a really clear picture of this frightful specter and the effect on our young Pip. Oh, don't cut my throat, sir. Poor Pip. I pleaded in terror. Pray don't do it, sir. Well, what happens next? Tell us your name, said the man. Quick. Pip, sir. Once more, said the man, staring at me. Give it mouth. That's an interesting expression, give it mouth. Pip. Pip, sir. Show us where you live, said the man. Pint out the place. I wonder if this is just a typo, with the Project Gutenberg thing, so I'm just going to go point out the place. Point out the place. I pointed to where our village lay, on the flat, inshore, among the alder trees and pollards, a mile or more from the church. The man, after looking at me for a moment, turned me upside down and emptied my pockets. There was nothing in them but a piece of bread. When the church came to itself, for he was so sudden and strong that he made it go head over heels before me, and I saw the steeple under my feet. When the church came to itself, I say, I was seated on a high tombstone, trembling while he ate the bread ravenously. So it's a really electrifying entrance. You know, Pip is terrified. The man just flips him upside down. So again, we get more high-octane action. And who is this terrible man with the iron on his leg? And there we have the cover image of the book in the churchyard. "You young dog," said the man, licking his lips. "Ruh-oh. What fat cheeks you ha got." In general, these days we don't do dialect like this. People don't write dialect. I believe they were fat, though I was, at that time, undersized for my years and not strong. So here we see control of temporality, where we are in first person, but we know that this scene in the churchyard happened before the time of the telling of the tale, because at that time means that we are now at a future time from that moment. So this is that sort of, first person temporal control that you see a lot in first person narratives. Kazuo Ishiguro's "Never Let Me Go" is a text I'm teaching this quarter that does it as well. Oops, where did I go? "Darn me if I couldn't eat 'em," said the man, with a threatening shake of his head. "And if I hadn't half a mind to't." Again, dialect, I just don't know if we need it. I earnestly expressed my hope that he wouldn't, and held tighter to the tombstone on which he had put me, partly to keep myself upon it, partly to keep myself from crying. So we really do feel the terror that Pip is experiencing in this moment. Also, not everything needs to be in dialogue. So here, this is summary, just to speed up instead of doing, him pleading, we're speeding things up. "Now, looky here," said the man. "Where's your mother?" There, sir, said I. Now you can see the humor. We know, right? There's a bit of dramatic irony. We know that he's referring to the tombstone, but the man doesn't. He started, made a short run, and stopped and looked over his shoulder. There, sir, I timidly explained. Also Georgiana. That's my mother. Now that's just a little bit of that, Dickensian humor. Instead of Georgiano, also Georgiana, because that's what's written on the tombstone, which shows, how sweet Pip is and how young Pip is. And it's just funny, isn't it? Because that's obviously not her name. Her name is Georgiana, not also. Oh, said he, coming back. And that is your father? A longer your mother? We don't have this word anymore, I think, a longer. Yes, sir, said I. Him too, late of this parish. Ha, he muttered then, considering. Who'd you live with? Supposing you're kindly let to live, which I han't made up my mind about. My sister, sir, Mrs. Joe Gargery. Wife of Joe Gargery. The blacksmith, sir. Blacksmith, eh? Said he, and looked down at his leg. So immediately we can put two and two together. Blacksmith, eh? Looks down at his leg. Sometimes people try to make every connection. You should leave some for the readers, especially ones as obvious as this. After darkly looking at his leg and me several times, he came closer to my tombstone, took me by both arms, and tilted me back as far as he could hold me, so that his eyes looked most powerfully down into mine, and mine looked most helplessly up into his. That's a real dilation of time in a tense moment, and I could see, someone else, a lesser writer, just doing, he stared intently at me, but instead there's a real dilation of time. Now looky here, he said, the question being, whether you're to be let to live. You know what a file is? Yes, sir. Of course he does. He's quick, our young Pip. And you know what whittles is? I don't know what whittles is, but Pip does. Yes, sir. After each question, he tilted me over a little more, so as to give me a greater sense of helplessness, God, and danger. You get me a file. He tilted me again. Who would know that tilt would be a very difficult word to type? He tilted me again, and you get me whittles. He tilted me again. You bring them both to me. He tilted me again. Or I'll have your heart and liver out. All right, we get the point. He tilted me again. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I was dreadfully frightened, and so giddy that I clung to him with both hands and said, "If you would kindly please to let me keep upright, sir, perhaps I shouldn't be sick, and perhaps I could attend more." How sweet is our Pip. He gave me a most tremendous dip and roll, so that the church jumped over its own weathercock. Lovely expression, because we know from the previous expression with the steeple that this man likes to flip Pip over. Then he held me by the arms in an upright position on the top of the stone and went on in fearful terms. You bring me tomorrow morning early that file and them whittles. You bring the lot to me at that old battery over yonder. You do it, and you never dare to say a word or dare to make a sign concerning your having seen such a person as me, or any person some ever, and you shall be let to live. So right away in the first chapter, our narrator Pip has been implicated in a secret and perhaps even aiding and abetting a criminal or a crime. But that is an enigma. You know, we talk always, at least if you talk about the French semi-artician Roland Barthes, and we talk about enigma and resolution. That's the hermeneutic code. What enigmas are being activated? When will they resolve? An enigma is being activated here as soon as this man appears. Who is he? And the question of when that enigma will be resolved, you know, we have 180,000 words to see where Dickens chooses to resolve that enigma. You fail, or you go from my words in any particular, no matter how small it is, and your heart and your liver shall be tore out, roasted, and ate. Now, I ain't alone, as you may think I am. There's a young man hid with me. In comparison with which young man, I am an angel. That young man hears the words I speak. That young man has a secret way peculiar to himself of getting at a boy and at his heart and at his liver. It is in vain for a boy to attempt to hide himself from that young man. So he's basically inventing a sort of boogeyman, as if he wasn't terrifying enough. A boy may lock his door, may be warm in bed, may tuck himself up, may draw the clothes over his head, may think himself comfortable and safe, but that young man will softly creep his way to him and tear him open. Wow, that's a vivid description, and that will surely scare a young boy into doing precisely what he's instructed to do. So poor Pip encountering this vivid describer amongst the graves. I am a keeping that young man from harming a few at the present moment. With great difficulty, I find it very hard to hold that young man off of your inside. Now, what do you say? So a long sort of dramatic monologue with lots of threats, but pretty scary, pretty compelling for a young kid. I said that I would get him the file, and I would get him what broken bits of food I could, and I would come to him at the Battery early in the morning. Say, Lord, strike you dead if you don't, said the man. I said so, and he took me down. Now, he pursued. You remember what you've undertook, and you remember that young man, and you get home. Good night, sir, I faltered. Much of that. Said he, glancing about him over the cold, wet flat. I wish I was a frog or a eel. What a funny choice of parting words, but very memorable. You know, you don't want too cliche of a villain popping out of the graves. As we know, those of us who are familiar with this book, you know, this man coming out from the graves is an iconic Dickens opening for many reasons, as we'll see why later. Okay, now we're coming into a beautiful, beautiful description that I love very much in the next few paragraphs. I need to remember to sort of keep my posture up and not flag as we get into the back half of a session. At the same time, he hugged his shuddering body in both his arms, clasping himself as if to hold himself together, and limped towards the low church wall. As I saw him go, picking his way among the nettles and among the brambles that bound the green mounds, he looked in my young eyes as if he were eluding the hands of the dead people, stretching up cautiously out of their graves to get a twist upon his ankle and pull him in. I mean, there's so much of richness here. Firstly, we've had a very dramatic opening scene, and this is the first, it's 1,500 words in, and except for in the first paragraph where he described his 5 siblings' tombstones as lozenges, we haven't really had much imagistic, image-filled language at all. It's just been sort of action, the pro-eretic code, as Roland Barthes would call it. And then here we have a strong image of this man eluding the hands of dead people reaching out from the graves. And we know that he's got this iron on his foot, so presumably he's escaped from prison. And here he is escaping death, or temporarily escaping death. So this is a man with immense yearning and will to live, because he's cheated his fate twice, it would seem. So again, I think sometimes student writers, or even myself, or amateur, or people who aren't as good as Dickens, which is most people, overuse imagery. But here we see, use it sparingly and use it when you have some intention. Otherwise, let the pro-eretic code and the action do the work for you. When he came to the low church wall, he got over it like a man whose legs were numbed and stiff, and then turned round to look for me. When I saw him turning, I set my face towards home and made the best use of my legs. And this is what I love. But presently, I looked over my shoulder and saw him going on again towards the river, still hugging himself in both arms and picking his way with his sore feet. Quite a tender, almost affectionate description. Among the great stones dropped into the marshes here and there for stepping places when the rains were heavy or the tide was in. The marshes were just a long black horizontal line then, as I stopped to look after him. And the river was just another horizontal line, not nearly so broad, nor yet so black, and the sky was just a row of long, angry red lines and dense black lines intermixed. On the edge of the river, I could faintly make out the only two black things in all the prospect that seemed to be standing upright. One of those was the beacon by which the sailors steered. Like an unhooped cask upon a pole, an ugly thing when you were near it, the other a gibbet with some chains hanging to it, which had once held a pirate. Again, so we have, he's got these irons, he's escaped from something, there's the graveyard, and now we have this gibbet for this pirate. And Dickens makes the comparison more directly. The man was limping towards this ladder, as if he were the pirate come to life and come down and going back to hook himself again. It gave me a terrible turn when I thought so. So our Pip has capacity for imagination. And as I saw the cattle lifting their heads to gaze after him, I wondered whether they thought so too. I looked all round for the horrible young man and could see no signs of him. Yeah, because the man's accomplice is now effectively Pip, so Pip is looking for himself. But now I was frightened again and ran home without stopping. And so ends the first chapter, and we have our enigma. Who is this man? What crime is Pip implicated in? Will he come back the next day with the file and the whittles and some food for the man? And will this alliance, this tense alliance, continue? So this was about 43 minutes, and I really enjoy typing word for word, and this is part one, first ever live stream. So if there were any technical hiccups and things like that, I apologize. Hopefully in time I'll get better. It doesn't matter if we have one person or two people or 0 people watching. I'm gonna see this through to the end. At 9:30 Central, when I started typing, I felt tired. It had been a long day. I taught this evening, but just the act itself seems to give me energy. And of course, Dickens's language is so rich that I find it energizing. And I hope that over the course of the next 52 weeks, this, or beyond that even, this kind of penetrates my being, and I'm really excited to see how this project grows and develops, and I hope we pick up people along the way. And I hope that if this is something you fall asleep to, or this is something you listen to at 2x speed, however you find a way to enjoy it, I hope that for you. But thanks everyone. I'll be Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9:30 Central, and next time we'll do chapter 2, and um, hopefully it goes as well as this one did this evening. I have to find a good catchphrase to end with.